Chapter 7 Universities. Of British universities, Cambridge has the most illustrious names on its list. At the present day, too, it has the advantage of Oxford, counting in its alumni a greater number of distinguished scholars. I regret that I had but a single day wherein to see King's College Chapel, the beautiful lawns and gardens of the colleges, and a few of its gownsmen. But I availed myself of some repeated invitations to Oxford, where I had introductions to Dr. Daubeny, professor of botany, and to the Regius, professor of divinity, as well as to a valued friend, a fellow of Oriel, and went thither on the last day of March 1848. I was the guest of my friend in Oriel, was housed close upon that college, and I lived on college hospitalities. My new friends showed me their cloisters, the Bodleian Library, the Randolph Gallery, Merton Hall, and the rest. I saw several faithful, high-minded young men, some of them in the mood of making sacrifices for peace of mind, a topic, of course, on which I had no counsel to offer. Their affectionate and gregarious ways reminded me at once of the habits of our Cambridge men, though I imputed to these English an advantage in their secure and polished manners. The halls are rich with oaken wainscoting and ceiling. The pictures of the founders hang from the walls. The tables glitter with plate. A youth came forward to the upper table and pronounced the ancient form of grace before meals, which I suppose has been in use here for ages. Benedicat, benedicature, benedicatur. It is a curious proof of the English use and wont of their good nature. These young men are locked up every night at 9 o'clock, and the porter at each hall is required to give the name of any belated student who is admitted after that hour. Still, more descriptive is the fact that out of 1,200 young men, comprising the most spirited of the aristocracy, a duel has never occurred. Oxford is old, even in England, and conservative. Its foundations date from Alfred and even from Arthur, if, as is alleged, the Feralt of the Druids had a seminary here. In the reign of Edward I, it is pretended here were 30,000 students, and 19 most noble foundations were then established. Chaucer found it as firm as if it had always stood, and it is in British story, rich with great names, the school of the island and the link of England to the learned of Europe. Hither come Erasmus with delight in 1497. Albericus Gentilis in 1580 was relieved and maintained by the university. Albert Alasky, a noble Polonian, Prince of Sirid, who visited England to admire the wisdom of Queen Elizabeth, was entertained with stage plays in the refectory of Christ Church in 1583. Isaac Casaubon, coming from Henry Court of France by invitation of James I, was admitted to Christ Church in July 1613. I saw the Ashmolean Museum, whither Elias Ashmole in 1682 sent 12 cartloads of rarities. Here, indeed, was the Olympia of all Anthony Wood's and Aubrey's games and heroes, and every inch of ground has its luster. For Wood's Athena Oxonienses, or Calendar of the Writers of Oxford for 200 years, is a lively record of English manners and merits, and as much a national monument as Purcha's Pilgrims or Hansard's Register. On every side, Oxford is redolent of age and authority. Its gates shut of themselves against modern invitation. It is still governed by the statutes of Archbishop Laud. The books in Merton Library are still chained to the wall. Here on August 27th, 1660, John Milton's Pro Populo, Anglicano Defensio, and in Iconoclastes were committed to the flames. I saw the school court, or quadrangle, where in 1683 the convocation caused the Leviathan of Thomas Hobbes to be publicly burnt. I do not know whether this learned body have yet heard of the Declaration of American Independence, or whether the Ptolemaic astronomy does not still hold its ground against the novelties of Copernicus. As many sons, almost so many benefactors. It is usual for a nobleman, or indeed for almost every wealthy student, on quitting college to leave behind him some article of plate and gifts of all values, from a hall or a fellowship or a library, down to a picture or a spoon, are continually accruing in the course of a century. My friend Dr. J gave me the following anecdote in Sir Thomas Lawrence's collection at London, were the cartoons of Raphael and Michelangelo. This inestimable prize was offered to Oxford University for £7,000. The offer was accepted, and the committee charged with the affair had collected £3,000 when, among other friends, they called on Lord Eldon. Instead of £100, he surprised them by putting down his name for £3,000. They told him they should now very easily raise the remainder. "No," he said, "your men have probably already contributed all they can spare. I can as well give the rest." And he withdrew his check for £3,000 and wrote £4,000. I saw the whole collection in April 1848. In the Bodleian Library, Dr. Bandinel showed me the manuscript Plato of the date AD 896, brought by Dr. Clark from Egypt, a manuscript Virgil of the same century, the first Bible printed at Mentz, I believe in 1450, and a duplicate of the same, which had been deficient in about 20 leaves at the end. But one day, being in Venice, he bought a room full of books and manuscripts, every scrap and fragment, for 4,000 louis d'ors, and had the doors locked and sealed by the consul. On proceeding afterwards to examine his purchase, he found the 20 deficient pages of his Mentz Bible in perfect order, brought them to Oxford with the rest of his purchase, and placed them in the volume. but has too much awe for the providence that appears in bibliography also to suffer the reunited parts to be rebound. The oldest building here is 200 years younger than the frail manuscript brought by Dr. Clark from Egypt. No candle or fire is ever lighted in the Bodleian. Its catalog is the standard catalog on the desk of every library in Oxford. In each several college, they underscore in red ink on this catalog the titles of books contained in the library of that college, the theory being that Bodleian has all books. This rich library spent during the last year, 1847, for the purchase of books, £1,668. The logical English train a scholar as they train an engineer. Oxford is a Greek factory, as Wilton mills weave carpet and Sheffield grinds steel. They know the use of a tutor as they know the use of a horse, and they draw the greatest amount of benefit out of both. The reading men are kept by hard walking, hard riding, and measured eating and drinking. At the top of their condition, and 2 days before the examination, do not work, but lounge, ride, or run to be fresh on the college doomsday. 7 years residence is the theoretic period for a master's degree. In point of fact, it has long been 3 years residence and 4 years more of standing. This 3 years is about 21 months in all. The whole expense, says Professor Sewell, of ordinary college tuition at Oxford is about 16 guineas a year. But this plausible statement may deceive a reader unacquainted with the fact that the principal teaching relied on is private tuition, and the expenses of private tuition are reckoned at from £50 to £70 a year, or $1,000 for the whole course of 3 years and a half. At Cambridge, $750 a year is economical, and $1,500 not extravagant. The number of students and of residents, the dignity of the authorities, the value of the foundations, the history and the architecture, the known sympathy of entire Britain in what is done there, justify a dedication to study in the undergraduate such as cannot easily be in America, where his college is half suspected by the freshman to be insignificant in the scale beside trade and politics. Oxford is a little aristocracy in itself, numerous and dignified enough to rank with other estates in the realm, and where fame and secular promotion are to be had for study, and in a direction which has the unanimous respect of all cultivated nations. This aristocracy, of course, repairs its own losses, fills places, as they fall vacant from the body of students. The number of fellowships at Oxford is 540, averaging £200 a year, with lodging and diet at the college. If a young American, loving learning and hindered by poverty, were offered a home, a table, the walks in the library in one of these academical palaces, and $1,000 a year, as long as he chose to remain a bachelor, he would dance for joy. Yet these young men, thus happily placed and paid to read, are impatient of their few checks, and many of them preparing to resign their fellowships. They shuddered at the prospect of dying a fellow, and they pointed out to me a paralytic old man who was assisted into the hall. as the number of undergraduates at Oxford is only about 1,200 or 1,300, and many of these are never competitors, the chance of a fellowship is very great. The income of the 19 colleges is conjectured at £150,000 a year. The effect of this drill is the radical knowledge of Greek and Latin and of mathematics, and the solidity and taste of English criticism. Whatever luck there may be in this or that award, an Eton captain can write Latin longs and shorts, can turn the court guide into hexameters, and it is certain that a senior classic can quote correctly from the Corpus Poetarum, and is critically learned in all the humanities. Greek erudition exists on the Isis and Cam. Whether the Maud man or the brazen-nose man be properly ranked or not, the atmosphere is loaded with Greek learning. The whole river has reached a certain height, and kills all that growth of weeds which this Castalian water kills. The English nature takes culture kindly. So Milton thought. It refines the Norseman. Access to the Greek mind lifts his standard of taste. He has enough to think of, and unless of an impulsive nature, is indisposed from writing or speaking, by the fullness of his mind and the new severity of his taste. The great silent crowd of thoroughbred Greekians, always known to be around him, the English writer cannot ignore. They prune his orations and point his pen, hence the style and tone of English journalism. The men have learned accuracy and comprehension, logic and pace or speed of working. They have bottom, endurance, wind. When born with good constitutions, they make those eupeptic studying mills, the cast iron men, the dura ilia, whose powers of performance compare with ours as the steam hammer with the music box. Cokes, Mansfields, Seldons, and Bentleys. And when it happens that a superior brain puts a rider on this admirable horse, we obtain those masters of the world who combine the highest energy in affairs with a supreme culture. It is contented by those who have been bred at Eton, Harrow, Rugby, and Westminster that the public sentiment within each of those schools is high-toned and manly, that in their playgrounds courage is universally admired, meanness despised, manly feelings and generous conduct are encouraged, that an unwritten code of honor deals to the spoiled child of rank and to the child of upstart wealth an even-handed justice, purges their nonsense out of both, and does all that can be done to make them gentlemen. Again, at the universities, it is urged that all goes to form what England values as the flower of its national life, a well-educated gentleman. The German Huber, in describing to his countrymen the attributes of an English gentleman, frankly admits that in Germany we have nothing of the kind. A gentleman must possess a political character, an independent and public position, or at least the right of assuming it. He must have average opulence, either of his own or in his family. He should also have bodily activity and strength, unattainable by our sedentary life in public offices. The race of English gentlemen presents an appearance of manly vigor and form not elsewhere to be found among an equal number of persons. No other nation produces the stock, and in England it has deteriorated. The university is a decided presumption in any man's favor, and so eminent are the members that a glance at the calendars will show that in all the world One cannot be in better company than on the books of one of the larger Oxford or Cambridge colleges. These seminaries are finishing schools for the upper classes and not for the poor. The useful is exploded. The definition of a public school is a school which excludes all that could fit a man for standing behind a counter. No doubt the foundations have been perverted. Oxford, which equals in wealth several of the smaller European states, shuts up the lectureships which were made, quote, public for all men thereunto to have concourse, misspends the revenues bestowed for such youths, quote, as should be most meet for towardness, poverty, and painfulness. There is gross favoritism. Many chairs and many fellowships are made beds of ease, and it is likely that the university will know how to resist and make inoperative the terrors of parliamentary inquiry. No doubt their learning is grown obsolete. But Oxford also has its merits, and I found here also proof of the national fidelity and thoroughness. Such knowledge as they prize they possess and impart, whether in course or by indirection, whether by a cramming tutor or by examiners with prizes and foundational scholarships. Education, according to the English notion of it, is arrived at. I looked over the examination papers of the year 1848 for the various scholarships and fellowships, the Lusby, the Hertford, the Dean Ireland, and the University, copies of which were kindly given me by a Greek professor, containing the tasks which many competitors had victoriously performed, and I believed they would prove too severe tests for the candidates for a bachelor's degree in Yale or Harvard. And in general, here was proof of a more searching study in the appointed directions, and the knowledge pretended to be conveyed was conveyed. Oxford sends out yearly 20 or 30 very able men, and 300 or 400 well-educated men. The diet and rough exercise secure a certain amount of Old Norse power. A fop will fight, and in exigent circumstances will play the manly part. In seeing these youths, I believed I saw already an advantage in vigor and color and general habit over their contemporaries in the American colleges. No doubt, much of the power and brilliancy of the reading men is merely constitutional or hygienic. With a hardier habit and resolute gymnastics, with 5 miles more walking, or 5 ounces less eating, or with a saddle and gallop of 20 miles a day, with skating and rowing matches, the American would arrive at as robust exegeses and cheery and hilarious tone. I should readily concede these advantages, which it would be easy to acquire, if I did not find also that they read better than we, and write better. English wealth falling on their school and university training makes a systematic reading of the best authors, and to the end of a knowledge how the things whereof they treat really stand, whilst pamphleteer or journalist, reading for an argument for a party, or reading to write, or at all events for some by-end imposed on them, must read meanly and fragmentarily. Charles I said that he understood English law as well as a gentleman ought to understand it. Then they have access to books, the rich libraries collected in every one of many thousands of houses, give an advantage not to be attained by a youth in this country. When one thinks how much more and better may be learned by a scholar who immediately on hearing of a book can consult it, than by one who is on the quest for years and reads inferior books because he cannot find the best. Again, the great number of cultivated men keep each other up to a high standard. The habit of meeting well-read and knowing men teaches the art of omission and selection. Universities are, of course, hostile to geniuses, which, seeing and using ways of their own, discredit the routine, as churches and monasteries persecute youthful saints. Yet, we all send our sons to college, and though he be a genius, the youth must take his chance. The university must be retrospective, the gale that gives direction to the veins on all its towers blows out of antiquity. Oxford is a library, and the professors must be librarians. And I should as soon think of quarreling with the janitor for not magnifying his office by hostile sallies into the street, like the governor of Kerch or Kinburn, as of quarreling with the professors for not admiring the young neologists who pluck the beards of Euclid and Aristotle, or for not attempting themselves to fill their vacant shelves as original writers. It is easy to carp at colleges, and the college, if we will wait for it, will have its own turn. Genius exists there also, but will not answer a call of a committee of the House of Commons. It is rare, precarious, eccentric, and darkling. England is the land of mixture and surprise, and when you have settled it that the universities are moribund, out comes a poetic influence from the heart of Oxford to mold the opinions of cities, to build their houses as simply as birds their nests, to give veracity to art and charm mankind, as an appeal to moral order always must. But besides this restorative genius, the best poetry of England of this age, in the old forms, comes from two graduates at Cambridge. Chapter 8, Religion. No people at the present day can be explained by their national religion. They do not feel responsible for it. It lies far outside of them. Their loyalty to truth and their labor and expenditure rests on real foundations and not on a national church. An English life, it is evident, does not grow out of the Athanasian Creed, or the Articles, or the Eucharist. It is with religion as with marriage. The youth marries in haste. Afterwards, when his mind is opened to the reason of the conduct of life, he is asked what he thinks of the institution of marriage and of the right relations of the sexes. I should have much to say, he might reply, if the question were open, but I have a wife and children, and all question is closed for me. In the barbarous days of a nation, some cultus is formed or imported. Altars are built, tithes are paid, priests ordained. The education and expenditure of the country take that direction. And when wealth, refinement, great men, and ties to the world supervene, its prudent men say, we fight against fate, or lift these absurdities which are now mountainous. Better find some niche or crevice in this mountain of stone which religious ages have quarried and carved, wherein to bestow yourself, than attempt anything ridiculously and dangerously above your strength, like removing it. In seeing old castles and cathedrals, I sometimes say, as today in front of Dundee Church Tower, which is 800 years old, this was built by another in a better race than any that now look on it. And plainly there has been great power of sentiment at work in this island, of which these buildings are the proofs, as volcanic basalts show the work of fire which has been extinguished for ages. England felt the full heat of the Christianity which fermented Europe, and drew, like the chemistry of fire, a firm line between barbarism and culture. The power of the religious sentiment put an end to human sacrifices, checked appetite, inspired the Crusades, inspired resistance to tyrants, inspired self-respect, set bounds to serfdom and slavery, founded liberty, created the religious architecture. York, Newstead, Westminster, Fountains Abbey, Ripon, Beverley, and Dundee, works to which the key is lost, with the sentiment which created them, inspired the English Bible, the liturgy, the monkish histories, the Chronicle of Richard of Devizes. The priest translated the Vulgate and translated the sanctities of old hagiology into English virtues on English ground. It was a certain affirmative or aggressive state of the Caucasian races. Man awoke refreshed by the sleep of ages. The violence of the northern savages exasperated Christianity into power. It lived by the love of the people. Bishop Wilfrid manumitted 250 serfs, whom he found attached to the soil. The clergy obtained respite from labor for the bore of the Sabbath and on church festivals.